Welcome, everyone. Welcome to the StartupU BlueChilli event, creating a new business, side hustle, or startup. Where do I start? My name is Pete. We also have on the call Philippa and Hillary, who are going to present with us this evening. Before I get too much further into things, though, I do want to welcome you all and to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which we all meet. For me, up in the Blue Mountains of New South Wales, that is the Darug and Gundagara people, and whoever it is for where you are, wanting to pay my respects to the elders past, present, and future. And wanting to welcome you all. As I said before, feel free to change your Zoom name if you have anything you want to promote, if you've already started a business, a side hustle, and you want to get that name out there. And also invite you to turn on your cameras. We deliberately chose a meeting instead of a webinar. We do have a few activities and we want to keep it interactive. And seeing your faces and seeing how you're responding to what we're talking about also makes it really, that much more engaging for us. So if you are, not on the train, then, feel free to turn your camera on. Don't have to, but invite you to. So as I said, we've got Hillary, Philippa. My name is Pete. We're from BlueChilli, and we're going to run you through some interesting things tonight that will help you to get started on your startup, new business, or side hustle journey. And what we're going to cover tonight is three aspects of a business. That's desirability, feasibility, and viability. We're going to talk through each of those individually, and then we're going to go through an activity at the end that will tell you where you should start for your business, which is, I assume, based on the name of the webinar, why you're all here. But we'll get to that in a moment. So desirability, just kind of a really quick and dirty overview. Desirability is about whether customers want the thing that you're going to provide for them or sell to them. Feasibility is about whether you can actually provide that value proposition, that service, that product. And viability is whether it can be profitable. Again, this is a business, not just a hobby. So you want to make sure that it can make money. And if you can do all three of those things, congratulations, you get cake. You might survive till your first birthday and get to blow out that candle and enjoy that delicious sugary goodness. And the other important thing to let you know is that we are skimming the surface. So tonight we're looking at, what do I need to think about? What are the things you need to think about when you're thinking about starting a business? We're going to go over those, in the next 45, 50 minutes. Usually each one of these things that we're talking about, we do about an hour and a half masterclass or workshop on it. And in those areas of viability and feasibility and desirability, we would spend months making sure that we've experimented and tested and validated those things. So absolutely skimming the surface. It may be a bit overwhelming, but hopefully also really exciting, and inspire you to do whatever it is that you're planning on doing. And of course, we have StartupU, which is designed by the experts at BlueChilli, has been used to launch more than 140 successful businesses. It's a step-by-step guide. It's using a proven framework, and it's beginner-friendly, using plain language as much as possible. I'll talk more about that at the end. But if you're like, oh, I want to know more about that, chances are we're going to say, go to StartupU, and we'll point you to some of the lessons in there that you can investigate some of these things. But before we kind of talk at you a lot, I want an opportunity to get to know you, who you are. What do you hope to get out of tonight? You have the inspiration, you have the information, you just want to be entertained, or is there something else? And if there's something else, feel free to put it in the chat, or put some text on the screen. Someone's gone for all four. How very exciting. Setting a high bar. Where are you on the journey of starting a new business or a side hustle or a startup? Just thinking about it, you're curious, you're ready to leap, you've just started, or you're like neck deep in it already. So a lot of you are thinking about it. Some of you have started. Glad to hear it. Nice. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for like being bold and putting it out there as like what is actually stopping you.
Awesome. I'm Hillary Brainerd. I'm head of marketing at BlueChilli, and I'm going to talk about desirability. So today I'm going to tell you what we mean by desirable, why it's important when starting your own business, and how to make sure that your business is desirable. So first, let's talk about why startups fail. Can anyone guess what the top reason is that startups fail? And you can either put your hand up or just drop it in the chat. A couple of people did get it right, and there's a lot of really good guesses in there. But the answer is actually no market need, so lack of market. And by that we mean tackling problems that are interesting to solve rather than those that serve a market need. So one of the first steps that you can take to make sure that you're not making the same mistake is to ensure that your startup is desirable. So when we say desirable, we mean, does your customer want it? So ask yourself, are you solving a relevant problem? And is this a solution that your customer really needs? So we can break that down into three sections. So we've got problem, customers, and value. So it's critical at the beginning of the ideas process to really hone in on the problem before you come up with the solution. So ask yourself, what problem are you solving? How is the problem currently solved? And how can you do it better or differently? Then once you've worked out what the problem is, you'll want to figure out who your customers are and why they would value your solution over what's already available to them. Let's take 3 minutes to write down your ideas and what problem your idea solves. If you don't have an idea yet, that's fine. Just write down a problem that you wish could be solved. So defining the real problem isn't easy. It often takes time, testing, and research. Like it's hard to get down to like what the heart of the problem is. And sometimes we make a mistake and we think we understand what the customer problem is, but we're wrong. And like I was saying, a good example of this is Uber. When they first started out, they thought the problem was people want access to an easier limousine service. But after testing this hypothesis, they discovered that the real problem was that taxi services are pretty horrible. So you'll see in StartupU, we do offer step-by-step instructions on how to uncover the real problem. You go through step-by-step modules that tell you how to conduct effective online research, how to set up problem discovery interviews, and also how to validate your problem, which I think is something that a lot of people struggle with. Like we got a lot of questions about validation before this meeting, so that's a really valuable module. So once you've nailed down the problem, you need to figure out who your customer is and what they really want or need. So the best way to do this is through customer discovery interviews. But to do this, you'll first write down a list of questions about your product or service, and then you'll use those questions to interview potential customers. Record their responses and analyze any trends. Identify similarities and differences, and then you can use those to define what your initial idea was and how it could be different or even pivot completely. You can use the responses from your interviews along with this value proposition canvas to help you really define what it is that customers want and how you can align your business with the customer's pains, gains, needs, and wants. So you'll start on the right-hand side with the customer profile. In the gain section, you'll write down the benefits your customer will get when they're using your product or service. In the pains, you'll record the problems your customer eliminates when using your business or service, and the jobs or the tasks that the customers will complete when using your service. So once you've filled out the customer side, you'll move over to the value proposition side. And on the left, you'll list out all your products and services. And then under Gain Creators, list out everything that offers something new or improves the customer experience. Pain relievers will be elements that remove frustration from the customer. You can also use the data that you collect from your customer discovery interviews to create an illustration of a typical customer. So this is an example of a customer profile. You'll see that it's pretty specific. It covers everything from demographics to goals and pain points and motivations. And you'll learn that creating 3 customer profiles will actually help you to define your product offering, understand the market need, and tailor your marketing efforts to the right people. So in StartupU, you'll have access to lessons that define your 3 customers, as well as specific steps on getting out of the building, which basically means getting out and doing those customer interviews. So I'm going to leave you with a few tasks to do this week and next week. So first this week, define the problem and interview 20 customers and record those findings. It sounds like a simple task, but it will take you a decent amount of time. So don't put too much pressure on yourself and just, it's okay if it takes more than a week. Next week, use your notes from the customer interviews to fill out your value proposition canvas and also create 3 customer profiles. If anyone has any questions before we go on to the next section, just drop them in the chat and I'll pass over to Philippa.
Thanks, Hillary, and thanks everyone for working on your problem and for sharing with us. So now I'm going to talk about feasibility. So as Pete mentioned before, I'm Philippa, the program director at BlueChilli, and I really like to work with startups when they are like kind of in the early stages, figuring out like what they're going to do and how they're going to do it and how they can be better than competitors, how their personal strengths can impact that. And so I'm excited to be talking with you today, and that you, like from what we've seen before, that you are kind of along that journey and already thinking about a startup, already working actively on it. So feasibility talks about your ability to provide the product or service that serves your customer's problem. The issue is that not everything that is desirable and that you will uncover that your customers want will be doable, or at least it will not be doable with the resource constraints that you have, be it time, the capacity to acquire money, infrastructure, and so on. One good example of something that, that highlights what is not feasible and how that can go wrong is Shoes of Prey, so an Australian startup who wanted to provide individualized custom shoes. And for their product to work, for their whole company to work, they needed to solve the design challenge, so the technology interface, like how people can customize the shoes, shoe size, and so on, and how that then connects to them on the production side. Then in terms of producing the shoes themselves, like working with factories and getting the materials and so on, the supply chain, and then the distribution, how are they going to sell these shoes. They did manage to raise a lot of money from some big name investors, and they were around for 10 years, but eventually they failed. And the reason they failed was that what they were attempting to do was not feasible. So we want to save you from doing that, as we want to save all the startups in our portfolio from doing these sorts of mistakes, just because, probably there's other ways you can go about solving a problem that can be feasible. So we want to uncover what that is. So what does your solution have to do? So what is the kind of value it has to provide? It needs to solve your customer's problem. And if you've done the customer research, as Hillary just mentioned, once you do it, tick, it's done. And that will inform your value proposition canvas, which, as Hillary mentioned, will try to solve how you create value for the customer. It should also be better than the alternatives, and it has to be possible and doable. So for that, you have to look at external factors and internal that you can do with the pestle and the SWOT, and then you have to conduct experiments and prototype and do an MVP. So let's go on to the value proposition canvas. And so as Hillary mentioned, what you want to achieve with the value proposition canvas is a better understanding of your customers, the jobs that they have to do with their product, the pains that they're feeling with current solutions, and the gains they want to achieve, and the products and services that you will provide to do that, and how they will be pain relievers and gain creators. A really good value proposition for a business is one that matches those gain and pain relievers to some of the gains and pains that your customer experiences. Not all of them, but some critical ones that they value. Once you nail your value proposition and you have developed the canvas, and on StartupU that's explained, you should arrive to a statement that is clear, concise, and short, and that articulates what you do and why a customer should buy from your company instead of a competitor, or buy from a company to solve that problem at all. And so here is an example of Uber's unique value proposition. This is like an older version of their of one of their pages, but it summarizes it really well, right? They have this first line: tap the app, get a ride. And then Uber is the funnest way to get around. And it basically just encapsulates what you expect from Uber, so that you can just access your phone to get a car to pick you up. And it does exactly where you are, where to go, and you can just pay from your phone. So, you know, all those kind of benefits encapsulated in a short sentence that makes it really clear for someone that had, you know, but potentially never heard of what an Uber is. Another example is from one of our portfolio startups. It's called Pick Me. They are based in New Zealand, and they focus on farmers and orchard owners and how they can simplify the admin of hiring and managing staff for them. And so also their value proposition really makes it clear what they provide in a really quick way. So as if you were an orchard, or if you are an orchard owner, you might be enticed to click and find out more. So to look at your external environment, you can use a pestle or other tools, but this is a really good one. And it can help you identify both threats or barriers posed by what is the environment around you, but also opportunities. And for example, COVID is a good, really good case study for this. So, you know, like on the one hand, it posed some challenges to traveling and people being together, event spaces and so on, but it also created opportunities for people selling and producing PPE, building new kinds of respirators and vaccines, restaurants, you know, putting out bubbles, like for example, in Europe, for people to be able to sit outside together and have dinner. So a bit of both. For example, with legal, it can also be a challenge for you if you work in fintech, and something you definitely should look at because there's a lot of regulation around financial services. But it can also be opportunity there, or as one of our founders in Queensland found out when the government announced they were going to do some changes to how builders had to report and manage their budgets. She actually created a platform to fix that for them before the problem really did arise for her potential customers once the legislation changed. From the pestle, you can use the analysis of the external factors to add to your SWOT, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats matrix or analysis. But you also should look internally to your strengths and weaknesses. And this should be yours personally, or yours and your co-founder or co-founders, because as an early stage founder or early stage company, that is very important and it really matters for your business. But then for the business itself, and your strengths can be, you know, you're good at public speaking, you have a strong network in the area where your business is concerned, or the opposite, you know, if you're like me and you're not from Australia originally, maybe having a network here is a weakness. You know, maybe I don't like public speaking and so on, and those will impact your business. And then through a SWOT matrix that is also on StartupU, you can actually match how you're going to address those opportunities and threats using your strengths and minimizing your weaknesses. It's also good to identify partners and who you want to hire and so on. And then doing the really, really fun part, which is conducting experiments. There's a number of experiments you can conduct. One example is called a fake door. And so I was served an ad for this Australian natural deodorant. And when I went to click, I realized that the deodorant didn't exist yet. But basically I could join their mailing list to be informed. I was like, okay, why not? So they had my email address and they validated with me that that would be interesting, at least, you know, for my profile and preferences on Instagram ads. I'm sure they know a lot about me. And this was in June 2020. And by September, they sent me an email saying, remember us? And I was like, no, I don't. However, I ended up buying their product and I liked it. So it was a good way to not only gauge interest and validate it, but also start building their customer database or potential customer database. Another example is to build a landing page and to try to validate that people that end up on your landing page, be it through ads, Facebook groups, whatever you're doing, and like where they click and which kind of behavior they experience they demonstrate on your website through Google Analytics and so on. And then if you don't have that feature developed or the product at all because that's what the experiment is serving for, to validate it, then you can just let them know and ideally collect their email address or something so that you can then connect with them. There's a number of other experiments that you can do, from a concierge to a model to Wizard of Oz, piecemeal, and so on. We've done that with our startups, and the reason we think and defend vehemently that you should do experiments is building something, yes, is exciting, it's expensive, and it takes time. And if you don't have the tech skills, you'll have to pay someone to do it potentially. So test in the cheapest, easiest way you can, and I'll talk a little bit more about that when I cover the assumptions. But also try to use tools that already exist, to do fake doors and concierge and so on, and basically hold the hand of your customers through the process until you really need to build. And when doing experiments, make sure that you know what you're trying to achieve and how you're measuring success. All of this is covered in a bunch of lessons in StartupU that you can check out. And that, for now, it's all from me. And over to Pete to talk to you about viability.
Just one thing to add to that feasibility for those people who said, what's stopping you is time or focus or something. Another experiment you can run around feasibility is, can you dedicate 3 hours to this? Or, can you get done what you need to get done in the half day you have? Because that may tell you whether or not the idea is feasible for you individually. So don't think it has to be, this technology-based experiment. It could be purely around your circumstances. But that's not why I'm here. I'm here to talk about viability, the very sexy, can you make money from it? Can it be profitable? Here's the entertainment part of the evening. I found this photo and I had to use it, and I built the rest of this section around just this photo, because as a startup founder, you are this bird and you're balancing between two things, and it's not easy. You got to have strong thigh muscles amongst anything else. But what are the two things in this particular example that I'm talking about? Can you have a guess? Cost and revenue. Hey, Anna. It's like you've seen my slides. Amazing. So yeah, profit equals revenue minus costs. So well done, Anna. So yeah, that when we're talking about profitability, or the viability of your business model, we're looking at can the revenue outweigh the costs? And just as a quick example, I was talking to an early stage fintech startup last week, and I asked about what's the business model, and they said, well, people will give us money and we will invest it for them, and we will take like a very small percentage of their interest, so like 1% of what they put in as an interest thing. And so my question was, can you run your business based on a 1% margin? Like what are the things you have to do in order to get that tiny little sliver of money that you get to keep and call yours? Does that actually make sense, right? So what are the sorts of things I'm talking about? When I'm talking about revenue, it's how do you make money, right? So what is your business model? It's how much is a customer worth? So over the whole lifetime of the time that customer is giving you money, what does that add up to overall? And how many customers are there if this thing really takes off? So what's the market opportunity that you're going after? And when we're talking about a startup pitch, and we're talking about business model, we're not talking about putting, the business model canvas on a slide or, a big multi-page document. It's literally, how do you make money? Like, we take a 5% commission on each transaction. That's the answer right there. So you're looking at, okay, how do we make money? Then weighing that up against what are the costs? So what is the cost of the good or the service that you are providing to the customer? So that's your gross margin, your cost of goods sold. How much does it cost to acquire a customer? So this is a big one, right? You might be selling something for $100 that you are buying for $90. You're like, we're making 10% margin. But if it costs you $25 to get every customer in the door, you're never actually going to make a profit. So customer acquisition cost is a big one for an early stage business and a big business. If you look at things like WeWork and Uber and stuff, what else do you need to pay for? So what are all your overheads and operational costs? And I'm going to go back to that customer acquisition cost because it's hugely overlooked. This is Alan Jones, the good one. He's a startup mentor and a friend of BlueChilli. This is his formula. And he even had it printed on a t-shirt and took it to startup days. Talk to customers, find a problem they will pay you to solve, Test your ideas with customers, learn how much it costs to get a customer, then build your product, right? Don't start at number 5, but also before you invest however much time and money and effort it takes to actually build your product, find out how much it's going to cost to acquire a customer, because that may be something you're overlooking. So that's it. That's the bird, squeezing things together. On the left, you've got costs. On the right, you've got revenue. And tying together what Philippa and Hilary have talked about tonight, this is kind of the model. This is your business model. You've got, on the left, you got your costs, which pay for the resources and the activities you have to do and the partners you're working with in order to deliver a value proposition. And the value proposition is what your customers are going to pay for. You're going to reach them through channels and you're going to build certain relationships with them. And that's what gives you revenue. And what you're looking at doing is making this bigger than this, right? A really simple example. I think we can agree that these two companies provide the same product, right? It's a seat on an airplane that gets you from wherever you are to wherever you want to be. But the business model is very different, right? The value proposition between the one on the left and the one on the right, the one on the left, it's full service. You get a big seat, lots of leg room, but you also get hot towels when you sit down and a glass of champagne, and they won't lose your luggage and things like that. People will smile at you. And on the right, it's like, how cheap can we get this ticket? How many of you can we cram into a plane? You have to fight for your seat. You have to pay for water, right? Very different business models, which means they're attracting very different customers because they're looking for different things, which means the way you're going to reach your customers is going to be different. And the relationships you have with your customers is going to be very different, which means that the things that you need to have in your business and the activities you need to do are going to be different, which is going to bring in different costs, right? Same product. Startups are not about building a product. They're about finding a viable business model. I say this because I'm representing team Viability here. But wrapping it all up again, desirability, what is the value proposition you're providing to your customers? Feasibility, what do you need to do in order to deliver that value proposition? And viability, does the business model make sense? We've got chapters and chapters of this in StartupU around business model, the market opportunity, financials and tractions, and the key metrics you need to know. But the big question that you all have, because we've just thrown a bunch of information at you and you're like, yes, but Pete, where do I start? So that is what I'm going to hand back to Philippa, because that's a difficult question.
All right. So how do we go about this? So obviously the next step is to start building, right? Wrong. Like don't start there, please. By all means. So basically what we want to do next is to test your assumptions. And this the goal is to decrease the amount of unknown of the things that you don't know and you don't know about your startup, the potential company, the product you're going to be selling, your customers, and transform some of this into what you know, so that we can de-risk what you're doing and make it more likely that you will succeed with not that many tries and not that much money or wasted resources. So we have an activity now for you to do, which is to list all the things that need to be true for your business to work. So all your assumptions about, what makes your product desirable, feasible, and viable, that if they are not, like that they have to be true for your idea to work. So I'll give you 2 minutes. I'll start counting. All right, time's up. Thank you, Valeria and David and Ikia, for sharing. It's really nice to see your assumptions. And this is an exercise that I love. We usually do it by inviting other people to come in and contribute. So, you know, other founders with founders, family members are usually biased, but, you know, people that don't know that much about your idea. And, you know, you just have like a short explainer. It can be your value proposition or something else, explaining what the business is, and then asking them to list down what they think are the things that need to be true for it to work. So once you've collected enough of these assumptions, and this is an exercise that you should come back to more than once, like while building your company, you will map them, and you'll use a matrix or a table, whatever you want, but basically you're going to organize these assumptions depending on how confident you are that they are true, and the impact that they will have on your business idea if they are false. So some things can be devastating if not true, and some things can just be annoying, and some things you're almost sure that they are true, and some things you're less confident. I would always say, you know, distrust how confident you are. I think it's good to assume that sometimes we don't have all the answers and that we have a bias, and that's why it's good to bring people on board that might not have the same perspective as you. But when it comes to working on proving your assumptions, you should start by focusing on the riskiest of them all. So it's the ones that are devastating if not true, and that you're least confident that they are true. So starting with those, the riskiest assumptions, you will need to, for each of them, list like what evidence do you need to prove that it's true. And this could be, you know, a percentage, it like can be a success rate, people paying, people subscribing, and so on. You should have a measure for that. What's the fastest, simplest, lowest cost way of gathering that evidence? You know, how can you do, should you do fake doors? Can you do landing pages? Do you do Google ads, Facebook ads? Like, how are you going to prove that this works? Is it customer interviews? And starting with your assumptions is very important as well to design what you're going to be asking your customers. So how are you going to collect this evidence? And then what is the cost? Just because some things are really expensive to run, you know, like if you're doing a focus group, that might be too expensive, you know, like if that's the only way you can collect that evidence, maybe focus on another assumption before. If you need to have a finalized product in order to prove that assumption, maybe that's not the time yet. So yeah, you focus on your risky assumptions and customer interviews before looking at your solution, and you'll be on your way. Also for this, there are StartupU lessons that you should check out. And over to you again, Pete.
As a way of motivating you to, you know, get off that, get off the starting line, stop procrastinating, make the time, book in those interviews, we are doing a progress pitch competition or session on the 6th of May. So 5th of May, I changed that. I don't know why I didn't come. 5th of May, Cinco de Mayo. Yeah, 6 weeks from today. This is something that I do when I teach startups at Sydney University. We take groups of students from absolutely blank canvas to a revenue generating business in 12 weeks. And every second week, we do these progress updates. You know, what have you been working on? What have you learned? What are your next steps? As a way of keeping accountability, but also as a way of giving advice. So that's something we want to offer to our StartupU users. You know, giving you an opportunity to share your thinking, and for us to give you some feedback and advice on that, and for you to connect with other people in the ecosystem. So save the date for that. So given that we are talking kind of like startups, and StartupU is built around the startup pitch deck, I thought I'd do a really quick problem solution business model pitch for StartupU. All right. So my name is Pete. I am the custodian of StartupU, which is where you can create, validate, and launch your own business in your own time. The customers that we're talking to come in kind of three brackets. One is the entrepreneur to be. These are people who are sick of their current work environment and they really want to start something and become their own boss. The second customer is a side hustler. These are people who are full of energy and ideas, and they want to keep learning and build something in their own time on the side. And the third customer are creative. They're passionate, they've got creative hobbies, and they want to turn their spare time into some extra spending money or some savings to help reach their goals faster. But the key factor about all three of these customers is they're just testing the waters. They're not all in on starting their own business yet. And when you're in that position, it feels overwhelming. There's so much information out there, so many podcasts and books and videos and so much advice that it's really hard to know, where should I start? How do I filter my way through all of this? So we built StartupU, which is an online learning platform designed by experts and used to launch more than 140 successful businesses. It is a step-by-step guidebook, so you can go at the pace that you're ready for and look at the things that you're ready to learn. It uses a proven framework, which we've used at BlueChilli to launch startups, and it's beginner friendly. We assume you know nothing and we use plain English to tell you what you need to know. This is how it works. The chapters are built around a startup pitch deck, and we include a template pitch deck so that you can start building your own. Each lesson consists of videos, instructions, and activities, so you can go step by step through building your business. And at the end of each chapter, we ask you a series of questions that help you and guide you on what you need to know and build your pitch deck as you go. It's got 2,500 users and it's had 1,000 visits in 2021 alone, and our users love it. The business model is it's a subscription business. It's $199 a year or $25 a month. And for that, you get full access to StartupU lessons. You get a startup pitch template, exclusive community channels where you can ask your questions. You get marketing opportunities through the StartupU blog and access to the progress pitch competitions. Our ask is that you save the date for Wednesday, 5th of May, Cinco de Mayo, for the first progress pitch competition and event where you can share your progress, get support from your peers, and feedback from BlueChilli. That's it. That's the end of us throwing information at you. We do want to hear your questions, so feel free to put questions in the chat. But we also do want to know, what do you want more of? If we're going to do more of these events, what do you want? Or what other support do you need?
Thank you. That was awesome.
Thank you, Mick.
I'd love to see some info around funding, different ways of funding and how to get started. And sometimes it's like, okay, I'm in a full-time job. I'd love to do this, but how do I go from, I don't have much spare time to, I can quit my job and start working on this full-time? It's a real, I think that's probably the hardest part I'm facing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'll give you a quick answer now, which is it's difficult. All of the hype around startups and starting your own business is around venture capital. Yeah. That is a very, very thin slice of, where businesses actually go. So yeah, your question is really valid in terms of other options. I mean, we call it bootstrapping, right? Like you're either working yourself part-time or full-time and funding this on the side, or doing some kind of transition from one to the other.
Yeah, I saw a question from Valeria that I think it's very relevant. Valeria, I would say that to find mentors, co-founders, or pro bono legal advice, there's like some online communities for this that specifically focus on that. Like, for example, One Roof is specifically for women and they are all virtual. You have that with co-working spaces, and a lot of them have developed online only programs in 2020 that they still have now, and they are cheaper than paying for a space. And I think then the other really big way to do this is to enroll in a startup accelerator or an incubator. So like usually you get all three of opportunities to find a co-founder I think are harder to define. I think it's kind of, you go around, you talk with like-minded people, you attend meetups and so on, and you find them. Or a program like Antler, for example, but than that for finding mentors and legal advice. I think it's a lot through these kind of programs, or finding an advisor that is good with legal stuff that can provide that for free. But yeah.
Some follow-up emails will include some links to various communities and event listings. Cool. Thank you, everyone, for coming along. This has been great. Do share your insights on social media and tag us. We're at on Twitter and on Instagram. I just put here, and yeah, tell more people about it. We'll run more of these events, so tell people to head on over to startupu.io and sign up to the mailing list or give StartupU a try.